But guess what? We got another amazing session up next. And we got the great Laura Atkins, co-founder of Word of the Wise, talking about spooky story time, deliverability horror stories that will give you chills. So let's go ahead and get Laura in here, shall we? All right.
Let's see.
Looks like there
Did
we
that
go.
work?
Now I can hear
All
you.
right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. First
Hello,
and
hello.
foremost, yeah, loving that hat, by the way.
Thank
Oh my
you.
goodness, that is so awesome. You look like you're in your perfect environment. Our ghoulish and ghostly gods are behind you. We get the fire going. Oh man, I'm so excited. Let me go ahead and get your presentation up here in just a second. Guys,
Woo.
Laura Atkins from Word of the Wise. We're talking about spooky story time, deliverability horror stories that will give you chills. Laura, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it here away in just a moment. Everyone, if you got questions, remember to upvote them in the question tab. Please, please, please. And we'll go ahead and let Laura get started here. Laura, I'm going to go ahead and creep around email camp, make sure my camper is all right. I'll let you go ahead and get situated here. Let me know if you need anything. I'll be back for the Q&A, all right?
Cool. Awesome.
Awesome. See you in a little bit.
So, hi, everybody. I'm Laura Atkins, and I am the principal and co-founder of Word to the Wise. And I am here mostly to tell you deliverability horror stories. And, I've done a lot of speaking over the years, and generally when I come in, I'm all sort of official, and we can fix delivery, and delivery is all in your control, and it will all work, and there's no problems here. And I thought, given this was horror stories and creepy camps and Halloween, that what I'd do this time would be I'd actually tell some of the stories and some of the things that have happened over the years, both as a, oh, that was bad, but also as a way to kind of talk about sometimes how we got here. I've been doing deliverability for 20 years now, and before that I was actually in the anti-spam space, and I was actually fighting spam and doing a whole bunch of activism stuff. And I've seen some stuff, man, and we're going to share some of that stuff today, and we're going to talk about how the things that have happened have driven where we are today in terms of deliverability. So my first story is an older event that happened back when we were in the early days, in the very early days, basically about the time that the first "This is Spam" buttons came out. Most blocking was done manually. So there were a bunch of people who, sat at desks and read spam for a living and decided how they were going to block it. And so they could block by IP address, and they could block by domain, and they could do all of this stuff. So a friend of mine at the time is working at AOL. And she and, her colleagues, there were maybe half a dozen of them working there. And they're writing rules and blocking by IP addresses. And all of a sudden, they start to get some problems. And they start to see, oh my God, why are we having these problems? Why is all this mail? Why is support coming up? What's going on? Come to find out, someone had written a rule that had blocked over 1 billion IP addresses. Somebody wrote a rule inside AOL that blocked every IP address that started with a 6 through every IP address that started with a 66. You do the math, it's over 1 billion IPs that they blocked. So they rolled the changes back and everybody fixed it. And then they went and they did the troubleshooting because they wanted to find out what happened and how can we not block 1 billion IPs accidentally again. So a couple days later, my friend's sitting at her desk in her cube, and her manager and her team lead are walking down the aisle towards her desk, carrying a bunch of balloons and a group of t-shirts. They stopped at her desk and they said, "Congratulations, you're the person that blocked 1 billion IP addresses." And she did. She got balloons and she got a t-shirt. And then, they started thinking about, how can we not do this? How can we not have somebody make a typo in a rule that blocks 1 billion IPs? So fast forward, and again, we're still at AOL. And, for a very long time before Gmail came on, AOL was kind of at the forefront of how blocks worked and at the forefront of what mail happens and who is handling, how they're handling mail. They were really doing a bunch of interesting things. And they started with some of the first AI, and they started with some of the first programmatic rules to be able to block mail and not block mail and have things dynamic, and that you didn't have to have, 6 people in a room reading spam all day long in order to block it and to protect their customers. So again, I still have some friends who are inside AOL, and I'm doing the delivery thing, and I'm getting clients coming in and going, hey, we're having problems, and can we fix this? And then for the most part, even back then, I could generally go through and say, okay, what are we doing? How do we fix this? And could go through the process and get email unblocked without having to call people and without having to contact people going, I got nothing, help, what's going on here? But there came a point a few years after my friend blocked 1 billion IP addresses, where I couldn't figure out what was going on. And we were struggling with a client, and we were struggling to figure out, and we tried all of these things. We'd been working on it for a couple of weeks, and we couldn't get their email to go consistently to the inbox. And I was at a loss. I couldn't figure out what the problem was, and I couldn't figure out how to fix this. So I finally called a different friend at AOL, and I said, help. I can't figure it out. What am I missing? What data am I missing here? What can you tell me that can send me off on the right fix so we can do this? And they looked at the issue, and they looked at the mail, and they looked at the sender, and they looked at all of their internal reputation tools, and they went, that's weird. Let me go talk to the developers. So they went to go talk to the developers, and they handed all the stuff over to the developers. Meanwhile, thankfully, they said, you know what? We don't think this is right. We think they're fine. And they unblocked. And so my clients were happy, and they were done, and all of their mail was getting in. But we kind of kept talking, just the developers and my friend and I kind of kept talking to figure out what was going on here. So finally, about a week later, the developers come back, and they're like, the AI is doing something, and we don't understand why, and we don't understand what's going on, but the AI has decided to block this mail. And the point here, and the reason why I'm telling both of these stories together is, we started with people doing blocks manually, and we started with people actually reading spam and typing things in. And we moved into the AI, and we moved into the machine learning, and we moved into a whole lot of automated systems, and none of them are perfect. We're still stuck with occasionally the AI does things we don't understand, and the machine learning does things that we don't understand. But it's not that much better when it was, a person could make a typo and could block 1 billion IP addresses accidentally. So that's the scary story of the blocks at AOL. This is another one, and is a little bit more personal about how the underlying deliverability works, and the kinds of things that happen, and the kinds of things that we as deliverability people have to tell our clients and tell our senders, and the things that the senders have to kind of cope with, the realities of what's happening. So I mentioned when I kind of introduced myself that I used to do anti-spam work, and this was back in the late 90s, and I was still working in the lab, and I was still a molecular biologist and doing all of this stuff, but I had a lot of downtime in the lab, because you do the thing and then you've got to let it sit for 2 hours while it does whatever it's doing. And so we had a lot of time in the lab. And so I spent time online fighting spam, doing all of this stuff. Met a bunch of friends, and we kind of got together, and we kind of decided we needed to create some best practices. And at that point, there was not a lot of music streaming or anything online, and you couldn't really play music on your computer unless you had, plugins and different programs and things. And there was a company that wrote a program for Windows that you could load onto your Windows machine, and it was free. It was freeware, but they required you to give them an email address. But it was like the best thing out there, and so everybody had loaded this program on there. But they required you to give them an email address. And they didn't do any sorts of authentication. They didn't do any sorts of confirmation. They just required you to give them an email address. And what happened was a lot of people would load the software onto their machine, and they'd get to the point in the installation where it said, give us an email address. And people didn't want to get email from the company, that they just wanted the music program. So their lists were crud. Their lists were horrible, because people would put in all sorts of fake addresses, all sorts of addresses that belonged to other people. They wouldn't give their own. Their lists were really messy. So they were sending a lot of spam, and we had kind of decided, just as, how do we make the internet better, and how do we stop this company from spamming, that we were going to set up a picket line, and we were going to go picket in front of their headquarters in Seattle. So my friend who lived in Seattle, she organized this picket and got a bunch of her friends to go out there. And to be fair, it actually worked. And the CEO and a bunch of the executive team came down and we kind of talked about it. And they improved their sign-up process so that you had the choice of opting in versus just requiring the email address. Fast forward about 6-8 years, and now I'm in deliverability. Now I'm down in the Bay Area, out in Silicon Valley, and I'm working with a giant ESP who is having some delivery problems with one of their major customers, who happens to be this company that I helped organize a picket against many years ago. And this particular company is having problems because they'd gone back and decided that the best practices that they implemented back when we convinced them to, that they just didn't need to do that. And so they had kind of dug into their older addresses and they were having all sorts of delivery problems. So I go up to the ESP's conference room and sit in the conference room with a bunch of executives and the deliverability team for the ESP, and we're on the phone with the company up in Seattle, and we're talking. And the company's just like, well, but we're a big company, and you just need to call AOL. AOL again. This is, before Gmail even came onto the scene, or very early on from Gmail. You need to call AOL and tell AOL to let our mail in. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to help. It's just not going to work. AOL is not going to listen to me. And AOL will listen to me, but AOL is going to look at their stats, and AOL is going to look at their dashboard, and they're going to go, our customers don't want your mail. And the company's like, no, you have to call AOL and tell AOL to let our mail in. And I'm like, AOL doesn't care. AOL just doesn't care that your mail's not getting in. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to worry about it. So we kind of wrap up, and I give them my best advice of, how we can fix this and what kinds of things we need to do and best practices and what we're going to do. And I do actually eventually agree to call AOL, knowing that AOL is just going to look at me and go, we don't care, right? You know that, right? And I pack up and I leave, and then that engagement with that particular ESP kind of faded away because they actually had a really good delivery team, and the folks that I was working with there are now big names that everybody's heard in the industry and have moved on to, and are VPs and are directors and at large ESPs. So they kind of managed their whole thing, and that was fine. So a few years after that, I'm at an ESP type conference, and I'm sitting at a bar talking with a friend who was the junior deliverability person at that time. And they say to me, you remember that call we had with big company from Seattle? And I'm like, yeah. You were in so much trouble after that call. There was screaming in the hallways at the ESP that you were never going to be allowed to talk to any of our customers ever again because you told the customer that the ISP didn't care. And how could you tell the customer that? And there was the executive team was so upset. And I was like, wow. Okay, well, gee, thanks for telling me that. But I kind of went through this whole piece of, should I stop actually telling the truth to clients? And should I actually stop telling the truth to senders that, the ISPs don't care? And I kind of processed that for a little while, and that was fine, and kind of modified a little bit of what I was doing and how I was handling things, but that was fine. Fast forward another few years, I'm at a different conference, and I'm now sitting around chatting with the senior deliverability person from that ESP. And that person sits down with me and says, hey, you remember that call? And I'm like, man, this must, apparently I do remember that call. And they said, I was really mad. I was really, really mad because you said that the ISPs didn't care. But you were right. And the ISPs don't care. And we have to do the right thing. And we have to work within the framework that the ISPs give us. And they're not just going to be able to say, hey, it's a large company, let their mail in. So there's that piece of the ISPs don't care. You're going to hear from other folks, and there's a couple ISP reps here, I think, coming in later to talk. And they do care. They do want to deliver the mail that their customers want. But they're not going to do it because we as senders tell them that to do it. They're going to do it because their customers are telling them, no, we want this mail. My hat's falling off. No, we want this mail, and we want to be able to see this mail, and we want to get this mail. So that's the you'll never work in this town again. And I did, and I still do. Buckets of poison. So this particular story is, again, it's a piece of deliverability is sometimes outside of our control, and we can't always manage it well. This was a client who came in and was actually a security company. So they were a security company. They were collecting a lot of samples of spam, not spam, but malware and viruses and, all kinds of icky things. And they had this giant S3 bucket, and it was this S3 bucket of poison. And one of the things that they were doing was they were sending out links to the bucket of poison to their customers, who were many times security researchers and other sorts of senders or other sorts of people who had all the tools to be able to handle the buckets of poison. But at some point, somebody realized, one of the machine learning filters realized that the system had this giant S3 bucket of malware that was linking to it in the emails. And all of a sudden, their email deliverability went horrible. And they were on all sorts of block lists, and they were on all sorts of, you can't send this mail. And we kind of looked at it and we talked about it, because all of their mail was opt-in. It was confirmed opt-in. It was all security researchers. It was actually a fairly small group of people, but it was people who really wanted to be able to see what the malware was out there and be able to research and be able to look at the kinds of things that were going on. But the filters were just like, no, we are not letting this mail in. Just no. So the S3 buckets of poison, and we did a few things in order to be able to separate out the underlying S3 bucket from the emails and put in a couple extra levels so that the email itself didn't look like a malware email, and their deliverability was fixed and everything was fine. But it's important to remember that sometimes we're going to be sending stuff and delivery is going to be bad, and it's not that we're doing anything wrong. It's just that we're kind of in that multiple sigmas out, and so delivery can be challenging. This was of course, we're not spammers. This was, and I actually stopped working with a lot of these companies for a while. I've had a lot of clients over the years who've come in and said, we're having delivery problems. And they'd give me their domain, or they'd give me their information, and I'd go look in my own mailbox. And I have some really old email addresses. I have multiple email addresses that are old enough to vote, and one that I actually got back in 1993. And it got a lot of spam. And so I use these as a way to kind of manage things for clients. And they'd say, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I have all of this spam from you. And so we'd go through and we'd talk. And invariably what would be going on was they would be hiring affiliates, and they would be hiring people to send mail on their behalf. And those people who were sending mail on their behalf would be, in many cases, spammers, and would be using these old lists, and would be using bunches of traps, and would be just scraping addresses and doing all of this kind of horrible stuff. But they would be telling my clients, and they would be telling their customers, no, all of our mail is opt-in. And I'd be going, no, this mail isn't opt-in. And in a few cases, I actually, got on the phone with these affiliate mailers and sat down and had them tell me, of course we're not spamming. You must have opted in. And I'm like, your company didn't exist until 2003 or 2004 or wherever it was. This particular email address that you're sending to, I stopped using in 1999. And they would assure me that, no, I gave them permission, that they had permission. They were sending all opt-in mail. I just didn't know that I'd given them permission. And it'd be like, how can I have given permission and not know that I gave permission? And I think, and this is another one of those telling truth to people that sometimes we have to be a little careful about how we tell it. And I'm not very good at that. I tend to give the blunt truth rather than the massaged truth a little bit. But there's a lot of companies out there that are, no, we're not spammers. We can't be spamming. We're doing stuff opt-in. The people that we got the email addresses from tell us that they're true. But if you're not collecting the email addresses yourself, if you're relying on a third party to do the collection for you, then you don't know what they're doing. And they're all going to tell you that those email addresses are opt-in, and they're not always. But they will get on the phone with the people that they're sending mail to and explain to those people that the mail is opt-in. So this is my last story, and I'm happy to take some questions, although this is not your normal presentation, and so there may or may not be questions about it. But this is my last story, and I have to kind of preface this a little bit with that it is a little not safe for work. So, but it happened at work, so it's okay for me to tell. When I was in when I first moved from science into email, I technically worked for MAPS, who are now part of Trend Micro, and it was the first block list. But in addition to blocking lots of mail, we wanted to teach people how not to send spam so that we could catch them on both sides. And so they hired me in to manage their outsourced abuse desk team. And as part of that, I was actually working for a large network provider that was upstream of many, many, many companies. We were upstream at that point. We were upstream of places like eBay. We were upstream of Napster. We were upstream of Hotmail. We were upstream of a bunch of free web hosting or free website companies. GeoCities, if you remember GeoCities, we were upstream of GeoCities. We were also at the time upstream of a GeoCities-like website that was for the porn market. So it was kind of GeoCities for porn. Now, being upstream of GeoCities and being upstream of a free website hosting company, we'd get a lot of spammers that would come in, would stamp out like 50 different websites and then start spamming them, and then we'd just shut them down as the reports came in, and we'd shut them down and shut them down and shut them down and shut them down. And that worked with GeoCities because they knew the game, and we could just send off our little automation and say, hey, here's the newest complaint, and can you deal with this? And they would deal with this, and that was fine. Well, at one point, finally, the spammers realized that there was this free porn hosting site that they didn't have to host porn on. They could just host their pills or their, payday loans or whatever it was that they were sending for. So we started getting in complaints, and I triggered the whole process, and we started sending the mail for the website. But that particular site, they didn't realize what they needed to do. So eventually I hooked up with them and called them, and I was talking with the CTO. And this was, I'd spent my entire professional career up to this point in the lab. And so I was still a little bit kind of amazed, and I was still a little in awe of people that had like chief technical officer or chief executive officer. If you had a C in your name, it was like, oh my God, you must be really important. I got over that one. So I'm on the phone with the guy, and I'm talking with the CTO, and I'm explaining to him what the problem is and why he can't allow these websites to stay up and what he needs to do. And we're going through all of the pieces and talking about all of the things that need to happen so that we can manage the spam and not be contributing to the spam problem on the internet by hosting spam-advertised websites. And I'm going through, and we had a lovely, pleasant conversation, and he was really amenable, and I, explained all the things, and we're kind of wrapping up the call, and I'm sitting there, and I'm going, my mouth is going, and I'm talking, but I'm going through my mental checklist of, okay, we talked about what the policies are, we talked about what they need to do, we talked about how we're going to contact them, we talked about, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, I have to tell them. I'm going to have to tell this guy that I have never met before and who is a CTO at a company that bigpenis.hornypages.com must come down. I'm going to have to say this. And my brain, my mouth is still going and I'm still talking. And oh my God, I'm going to have to say bigpenis.hornypages.com must come down. And I did. I managed to get it out. But that was the point. It was like, how did I get here? I used to be a scientist and now I'm here on the phone telling CTOs these horrible things. And that is how I got into deliverability. So I think we have a little bit of time left. You can reach me at lots of different places and you can see me, ask me questions. Does anybody have any questions? Please don't make me say it again.
Oh man, Laura, that was I was dying. I'm glad my mic was off and my video was off. I'm sitting here just dying, literally dying of laughter. I love. It was like a How I Met Your Mother episode, and that's how I got into deliverability. Oh man. Oh, I'm so glad I was off camera for that. Oh yeah, we do have some questions, so let's get into this. Oh man. Oh, so too good. Okay. So guys, if you got any questions, please make sure you upvote them. I am trying to stop myself from laughing. Upvote them so we can make sure we get the questions answered by Laura. All right. So the first one's coming in from Perla. Perla asked, our company's emails have been marked as spam. Hope you're not sending whatever that domain was. Our company's emails have been marked as spam by an ESP, but I have no idea why. What would you recommend to do to figure it out why? Go in and ask them directly why? Hey.
So in some cases, it depends. Certainly, if you are working through an ESP, I always recommend folks talk to their email service provider. So if you're at Salesforce or if you're at SparkPost or any of those companies, go talk to their deliverability teams because those teams, or if you're at Mailjet,
or
sorry guys,
Mailgun,
yeah.
There's a lot of us.
There are, and sorry, that was bad on me. Go talk to your ESP team because the deliverability folks inside the ESPs are actually really good and they can help you with the troubleshooting process. If it is something internal to you, and if it is, mail going through your Google account or if it's mail that you're sending yourselves, then you start to want to look at, okay, what is the underlying, where are we getting our email addresses? What are we sending? And why would people mark this as spam? You can go ahead and talk to the companies in some cases, the consumer ISPs are really good about that. They all have postmaster pages. You can go in, you can open up tickets, and they'll talk to you and tell you, at least give you an idea of what's going on. In the B2B space, it's a whole lot harder, and I have an entire presentation on B2B mail. But yeah, sometimes you can go and ask, and sometimes you just need to read your bounce messages.
There you go. Okay, let me see here. That one's from Perla. And then Guillaume just asked, what metrics or tools do you use to identify a deliverability problem?
So where I am at this point and the things that I do, generally, I actually work with companies who know they have a deliverability problem. I tend to actually pitch my services as for those problems that nobody else has been able to fix. And so that's why I send you to your ESP first, because the ESP will go through a whole bunch. Once you get up to me, there is clearly a problem, and that we're seeing very low open rates. We're seeing mail go to the spam folder. We're seeing whatever it is, we're not getting the clicks. We're not getting the stuff. We're actually being blocked. So it's, we're getting those hard blocks at the IP level. Mm-hmm. And then looking at what kinds of strategies do we need to do and what kinds of business changes do we need to make? Because by the time it gets to me, it's not just we need to fix our SPF record or, we need to improve our engagement a little bit. But it's more like we need to actually look at our structural business problems in order to fix things. Mm-hmm. And so there's not really necessarily a specific metric or tools. It's more about let's look at your business and let's look at what you're doing.
A deep dive, if you could say.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Andrea asked, "Are you okay?" I think she was asking if are you okay from that horror story of it makes a good story, right?
It's a
Like
good story, and it really is true.
yeah.
It did happen, but it was, oh man, how could you not do that?
Life lessons.
Yeah. Why am I not in science anymore?
Oh man, that's very, very Armageddon of you. I'm a scientist and I can save the world. All right. Okay. And let's see. Joanne asked, does setting an SPF record help a lot when you're using an ESP?
So anybody that was like watching me over on Email Geeks like an hour and a half ago, I was actually yelling about SPF records. Yes, you should have SPF records. Now, when you're using an ESP in general, you don't need to set an SPF record for the domain that you think you do. You need to set it for your bounce domain and your envelope from domain and the one that nobody ever sees. And in many, many cases, the ESPs manage that themselves and they use their own domain for that. But yeah, you should be doing both. Well, you should be doing both SPF and DKIM when you're sending mail. And best practice is then to make sure everything is aligned. Not that you have to publish DMARC, but that your authentication all matches across the 3 domains.
There you go. Okay, let's see here. And then, there's one thing I wanted to talk about really quick from Neil. It was in the chat actually. That I love that he said this, but and Neil, I'm going to quote you really quick. But he said, "It is great to have someone mention this shift. I think it's the hardest concept to get through to clients when talking about the difference of emailing now versus 4 years ago. Shoot, even 10 years ago. I've been in this industry 4 to 5 years now, and it has changed. Everything has changed. It's constantly evolving. This technology and this concept is and Laura, correct me, I'm a millennial, but email has been around 30 years now, even less or more.
Yeah, apparently I just saw a thing, somebody's doing something, we're celebrating, I think it's the 50th anniversary of email. But email really, the commercial internet, I kind of think I came in late, but I didn't because I came in the mid 90s. And that was about the time that, AOL started allowing people to send email and to the internet. And, I kind of think of things as in terms of the spam issue and in terms of filters that they really kind of got going around 1999, 2000, 2001. But even then, postmaster pages weren't a thing. Feedback loops weren't a thing until 2007, 2008. And then we could kind of all just, manage deliverability based on feedback loops, and we could manage deliverability based on a whole lot of other things. But in the last 5 to 6 years, there's kind of been another tectonic shift, and we've hit a different inflection point where delivery isn't about your IP address. It's not about even necessarily your domain name. It's about the specific relationship between you and a recipient. The ISPs and Gmail and Hotmail and Microsoft and Yahoo. I think they're Yahoo again. The things that they do in terms of deliverability and the things that they do a lot of very user specific stuff. And so it's not like if you're sending to Gmail, then all of your mail to Gmail users is going to go to the bulk folder, or it's going to go to the inbox. And so it's a lot harder, and a lot of the tools that we have and a lot of the metrics that we use haven't kept up with the changes. And to be fair, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I don't know what the next level of metrics are. I can't figure them out. I'm hoping somebody smarter than I am will come up with the right things to do and the right metrics to use. But it is a real challenge these days to figure out deliverability, because a lot of our tools, we use bounce rates, we use complaints, we use open rates. Well, bounce rates aren't useful anymore because anybody can go pay a vendor to clean off all their bounces. And, open rates, well, we've got Apple and we've got Yahoo who will prefetch images. And then we've got all these other companies that, are messing with open rates And so we can't, as senders, we can't trust them because we don't know. And so we need to think, to take another step into deliverability is a bigger challenge than it has been. And I don't think that's going to change, but we often see things kind of ebb and flow. And I think we're kind of in that, we're in a tough place right now as senders.
Things are changing constantly, and especially in the last 2 years. Man, it's been 2 years. I can't believe it. It feels like the blip out of Avengers Endgame, honestly, because it's just and like I've heard multiple people say, the last big thing that happened before 20 years ago, before even COVID, especially with everything changing in email, was unfortunately 9/11. And so, like I said, everything has changed so much in such a amount of time. So it's just, we have to keep adapting. And like you said earlier, you were like, "Oh, I hope I find someone smarter." No, you'll probably collaborate with someone. I bet you will. Like you said, you are a scientist, not just smacking down on the porn sites and stuff like that. But awesome. Well, Laura, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day. I know you got a lot going on, so I appreciate you being here. Guys, Laura Atkins, thank you so much for being here.
Bye.
Awesome, guys. Bye, Laura. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.